has been about mask dates and vaccine mandates that we've often forget that a simple test, if you're feeling the symptoms, could be the very, very weapon that we need to fight the evil enemy, the Hydra, whose head keeps growing in place of another one, COVID-19 and the Delta variant. More to come on the testing. We're going to talk about it today with our distinguished guest, Shaquille Latimer from Down Under. I'd be very curious as to how they're doing testing in Australia. Mark Lee. And then we'll be talking about some other things going on in the world. And this Friday, from hopefully from PBS Carolina, I will be doing my live show from there on World Edition, where we may talk about the Supreme Court docket and get this, folks, William Shatner, Captain Kirk, going to space at the age of 90.
Yeah, Captain Kirk is going up to space. By the way, we did leave out our illustrious chess star as well as
I didn't see him show up. Sasha Starr,
yes.
I didn't see his name pop up there. Sasha Starr, host of Chess Stars and Economics Monday. Sasha, welcome. Sorry, I didn't see you.
Next time you'll be paid $100 fine.
Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't see your name in the console there. I apologize. Well, I assumed you were here. So
it's only $100. No problem.
Okay.
You can afford that. It's no big deal.
Done deal. Meet me in Toronto, okay? I'll take you for dinner. So let's talk about testing.
Well, hang on, Steve. Will that be a taxpayer-funded dinner that somehow is charged?
On me. I love Toronto.
You're not that sort of politician. Okay, I like it. You've got the right vote if I ever come to Carolina.
I got a little lazy, guys. I'm a little tired, so I'm staying up in the bonus room today. So sorry, but I'll have a better set on Friday. I just got a little tired. But anyway, real quickly, before we get into other world issues, I would like to talk a little bit about testing. I mean, one of the nice things about this show is we can learn from other nations of the world. So what kind of testing do we have in Australia? Do we have antigen tests? Is it PCR tests? And is testing something hard to find in Australia?
So last week on Friday, the Premier of New South Wales, which is the state that Sydney is in, being a Premier is the equivalent of being a governor. Roughly, it's about the equivalent of being a governor of a state in the United States. Actually had to resign because of a corruption inquiry. I don't think that she's guilty of it, but she's had to resign. So I have a lot of comments to make about vaccines, mandates, testing, and much of what I try to do when I make the comments I do is to try to be pragmatic, to try to build a bridge, to try to understand why people are not prepared to get the vaccine and what we can do to encourage them to do so. And I believe that I have the right to actually express those views. In fact, Article 19 of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that everybody has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. And I think that is, amongst all the other rights, that's Article 19 of the Declaration, I think that is a very, very important part of our society. Unfortunately, YouTube and Google have found it fitting to censor all of us without telling us what we said that they don't agree with. And on that basis, I will refrain from making any comment at all about anything to do with the vaccine. However, when we are free from the lockdowns that we are currently facing in Australia, if the United States does not have the political gumption to deal with these issues, I will address this with the United Nations and ask why they are prepared to allow a private corporation to infringe on my human rights. But until that has been resolved, I won't make any comments.
So, Sasha Starr, tell us a little bit about testing and Sakir, thank you for those comments. Are we able to get antigen tests in Canada, or is it PCR tests like what we have in the US?
Can I just say, Sasha has exactly the same problem as I've got, as do you, Steve, and as does Mark. We have been taken down off YouTube specifically for having made commentary on the vaccine. So whatever comment any of us make is going to leave us in the same position.
Okay.
And by the way, just to let y'all know,
change the topic.
By the way, just to let y'all know, because I did check, we are still in YouTube jail because I was thinking that we were coming out of jail today, but we are still in YouTube jail. I'm going to actually provide the link for folks on our backup system, since we do have backup systems and everything of that nature. But in terms of the primary one, we are still, and still is right, in YouTube jail.
That's really ridiculous. So,
there is nothing much I can say about Canada. There are all tests are freely available in any drugstore, your doctor, your just any place you want to go. I mean, the thing is that with vaccinations there is not really much need for tests except schools. I think that's a very special situation. And now the new very quick tests, like in a matter of 2 minutes you get results, they're going to be in schools available, probably airports, I would say. But frankly, it's really not a big deal of any kind.
Well, if I can just give you a little bit of commentary on that, I know that in a lot of places it's going to be required even for public places. I know for a fact, because I'm on their board, that our local theater here in Durham, the Carolina Theater, is going to require you either to show your vaccination card and or proof of a negative test. So that is going to be required, and that's just one venue. There are several other venues that will probably be doing that as well. So it's not just going to be the schools that will need the test. And by the way, I remember last year I had to take the test regularly because I was actually the testing company, and I'm talking about school testing in this case, that I work for and everything. They actually temporarily, that was a side gig of theirs. So they picked up a contract to actually package those tests. I can tell you it was a very tedious job and all of that, but they actually did the packaging of that and got those tests out to various people. And I know that we, I don't even know how many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands that we put out there and everything. And that was actually distributed, I think, mostly to schools, but probably also to hospitals and things along those lines around the country. And definitely it was interesting. And I know that I was required to take the test. I think it was at least once a week, maybe even sometimes twice a week. So we would come by and get the swab and all of that, and they would test and make sure that you were not having a case of COVID. And if you did, they sent you home to be quarantined, like you said. So it should be something that is definitely readily made available, as it is part of a society that is here for a while, even though we do seem to be turning the corner in the pandemic. But like I said, whether we're turning the corner permanently or there is a temporary turn, only time and the various variants, or to use your hydrant analogy, can tell. So we've got to figure out whether new heads are going to come up or not.
Yes.
So wait a second, Mark. I understand from you that you divide the problem into two. One is the tests are readily available, and another one, the validity and necessity of those tests, if I understand correctly. So when I was asked about Canada, all I said is the tests are readily available. It's not a problem at all. Now, the necessity, who is eligible for tests, why would anyone do tests or not to do tests or whatever, that's a different issue. If tests are readily available, now it's up to an individual to decide, unless he's required by either school or airport authorities or something like this. But they are available. Okay, that's all my points that I want to say.
Fair enough. Back to you, Steve. Steve disappeared. I don't know where Steve went, so I guess I'll wait for him to come back and everything. Hey, Shaquille, I had a quick question for you. What do you think about this? I'm just going to bring up another article and everything, but what do you think about the fact that apparently we're shooting rockets at asteroids to test our planetary defense? So everything that's going on in the world, and apparently today NASA has decided to shoot rockets into the skies to test our planetary defense. And I don't know, are we trying to expect like an attack from above or something? But I'm not exactly sure why we're testing those defenses when we've got concerns that are going on right here in America and the world. But apparently that is something that has recently come up and everything. So what are your thoughts just in general? Because definitely earlier Steve had mentioned the fact of Mr. Shatner going up into space, and definitely it seems like we're having more space exploration. So is this something that is something that we should be doing and doing as aggressively, given it is private enterprise that is doing it, as opposed to not necessarily NASA, because we do know that a lot of the people that are going up and doing these research projects are folks like Mr. Musk and Bezos and a number of others. But I was just wondering your thoughts about this new space race that we're in the middle of, apparently among the entrepreneurs of the world.
Well, I don't know, because I really have to defer back to Google and YouTube. They might get upset if I make a comment.
They might actually get upset if you make a comment about NASA and everything. Even NASA, they may get upset if you make a comment about that. Good point.
Well, your question in the first place, I'll just temporarily take this silencing micro pour off my face.
Uh-huh.
The question, I didn't quite follow the question, because you started off asking about NASA and then you went on to private enterprise and William Shatner. So what exactly do you want me to respond to? The idea of NASA shooting missiles at asteroids, or you want me to
we'll start off with that one, and then we'll go to the space race, the new space race. I was actually thinking that they were somewhat related, but we'll start off with what I started off with, which is NASA shooting rockets.
Well, I think these systems are not new. We've had either the systems in place, or at least the idea for those systems to be in place for quite some time. We know that there is a risk of asteroids hitting the Earth. We have asteroids hit the Earth all the time, but they're very, very small. And there always has been a concern that if something was to make it through the belt, what sort of damage could that do? So if we have the technology to potentially, mitigate the damage, that would be great. I think that one of the things that they look at is, and look, it's been a while since I've looked at these subjects, but I think one of the things that they look at is not so much destroying the asteroid, but blowing it up so that it fragments into tiny little bits, so that it's more likely to be burned up in our atmosphere and not cause an awful lot of damage. I know that it sort of sounds like a bit like science fiction, but they've talked about sending rockets up that they can attach to the asteroids and then veer them off course and things like that, which doesn't require much. You don't have to go off course by very much in order to miss the Earth, because of the distances that they talk about. So look, I think space exploration is a great idea, and hopefully that'll further our goals as humanity and further scientific discovery. That would be fantastic. There's also talk about, and it's been talked about for at least 20, 30 years. I came across this when I was a teenager, the idea of being able to mine asteroids for their mineral wealth, gold and platinum, and the other sort of metals and things like that. So look, it's always seemed like it's very far away. But it does seem to be getting a little bit closer. And I think that this is probably a private enterprise in conjunction with government that's going to make these things happen. So, look, very exciting times. I tend to think that I'm probably not going to see the end result in my lifetime. I think that we'll probably see some huge advancements in my lifetime, just like in my mother's generation and my grandmother's generation. Hey, we actually went into space. We put people on the moon. So I think there's going to be big leaps forward. But I think it might be, a much longer period of time before we actually get the end result. So hopefully my children, if I ever have them, or my grandchildren, will get to see a whole different world.
Speaking of your mom, and I hope that I'm not stepping out of bounds, and if I am, you can just...
You are, if you talk about my mother, yes.
Well, I was going to say positive stuff about your mom. So I understand that she's won an award, and I didn't know.
No. On fair conversation. Thank you, Mark.
No problem.
She's not quite as flamboyant as me.
I understand, and that's why I asked the question. So we will leave it at that. We will leave it at that.
Sasha,
what is your
yes, about space? Yeah, you're right. U.S. actually put people on the moon in the late 60s. Although there are all kind of conspiracy theories that it was all filmed in Hollywood studios in a Nevada desert. However, they did put people on the moon. Now it's happened, about 50 some years ago? More than 50 years ago, right? And in all those 50 and more years, they never put more people on the moon, although technology exists. And So there must be a reason why they haven't done it again, or trying to accomplish something more than that, either to put more people, more rockets, send them to Mars perhaps, or something like this. It seems to me that the interest to space travel greatly diminished, since it's now becoming just a matter of a couple of $100,000 and anyone can fly. So what's the big deal about that? It's I don't know. I wouldn't pay $200,000, $2,000 maybe, and I wouldn't rush to do it anytime soon. But maybe a couple of $1,000 I would pay. So what's a practical implication of all the space endeavors and spending considerable amount of money? What's actual use for people on Earth at this time? There is, if there is one. I doubt it. To tell the truth, I'm when I was a kid, I was so taken by possibility of future space travel, and I read so many books about that. And as time passed by, of course, I'm getting older, and maybe that also affects the way I think about it. But here we are. I think that I'd rather play a good game of chess than thinking about space travel.
Understood. Speaking of good games, I've been having some very interesting conversations. I'd love to hear from both of you since you're in the investment space. I'm hearing a lot of people that are telling me that I need to get involved in everything from metaverse to cryptocurrencies to a number of other things. And it does seem to be the popular trend these days. I don't care where you go on social media. There are people that are saying that this is the new way of investment. They're saying that in some cases, I've even heard people tell me that, matter of fact, I was talking to a young lady yesterday from Dallas, Texas, and she was telling me that stocks and the things that you're involved in, Sasha, are outdated and that there is going to be this new wave. I am actually a little bit leery. That may surprise Shaquille, but because I want to make sure that things are actually done and not just the fad of the day and everything. So I was just wondering, what are your thoughts when you're hearing so many of our young people, particularly the millennials and the Gen Zs, that seem to be buying totally into the cryptocurrency, the Bitcoin, and I would even argue, and that's what I was going to bring up yesterday, the metaverse kind of attitude. And I know that that's separate because that's more like real estate. It's internet real estate, but it is still real estate. So it does seem that they are going into more of these computer generated things, whether it's computer real estate or whether it's computer money, which is what cryptocurrency is. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are about us going into these computer things, because a lot of times they're even tying it into our history, because they're saying that this is a way for us to, quote unquote, and I've used this term before, I know Shaquille, level the playing field, but particularly among those that are of different economic statuses, because they're saying that this is a way for poor people to actually get more involved in things and definitely make some quick wealth and all of that. But it does seem to me too good to be true. But I was wondering y'all's thoughts on that and whether I am right in being a little bit leery and cautious.
I'll tell you, it depends on what investment cycle in your life you are. Let's see if you're, say, over 40, 50, maybe even 60. Then preservation of capital is your main concern, and you have to invest conservatively, preferably in high-paying dividend stocks or some.
Sasha, he asked about poor people. So
yeah, I'm coming to that.
So the poor people who are 60.
Thank you very much. I'm coming.
We have no money.
Shaquille, I'm coming to that. Thank you.
I was having a crack at Mark, not you.
No, okay, thank you. Now, when you're talking about young people for whom preservation of capital is not a concern, simply because, first of all, they don't have capital. And now, number two, if you don't have, you don't preserve something you don't have. So then you are definitely will do well to consider extremely risky options, whether it's cryptocurrency, whether it's commodity market or futures or anything like this. Because if you don't have anything, there is no fear to lose. So what you got? Your few $100. So you will throw it, you will lose, but you learn something. So next time you will put another few $100, you will lose, you'll learn even more. So this way, you at least spend money to educate yourself, to make you a better person, stronger person, and maybe from the third or fourth time or whatever, you will strike it actually. So for this young people, that's the way to go.
Gotcha. What is your
he mentioned older people who are poor, which presumably means they're not white. Who are going to
put any race on it.
Who are going to take all sorts of risks on the crypto markets. I would say, look, if you can only spare $200 at that age, go to the casino, because at least you get, a cheap buffet lunch after you lose your money. You know what I mean? Like, what's the point?
Actually, you're right. Casino is a good alternative to invest in crypto. I would personally rather go to casino. Actually, I may go in a couple of weeks to Bahamas.
Oh, that sounds good.
I'd love to say I'll see you there, but we're in prison here in Australia.
I got to go kiss some babies and
I can't talk about
I got to go kiss some babies and get the people to love me, man. But anyway, maybe that's what they got to do. So I'm gonna close out with a couple of topics, and I'll be back tomorrow briefly, and then Friday for the whole hour. But the Facebook whistleblower situation, I think, is definitely something I want to talk about at the end of the week. Shaquille Latimer just brought up about YouTube and YouTube jail and these things. And honestly, I think that we shouldn't penalize people for expressing their opinions. But I think I do think there's a responsibility of the platform to not encourage and entice people to just use it for the wrong reasons, which is just beat each other up.
Who's the arbiter of what's the right and wrong reason to use the platform?
I don't know, Shaquille. I mean, it's a tough thing. I mean, all I know is that, and then let me see if there's any other news real quick. I want to end with that point, but let me. There are two other things I wanted to say. Is that real quickly, the Taliban has seized American weapons from surrendering Afghan soldiers, and President Biden says that he thinks curbing the filibuster was a real possibility. I don't know what cloud he's living under. But real quickly, let's end on the Facebook note. So here's my take on it. I mean, like, for me, it's very hard to judge who can or who would be the arbiter of deciding what you can and you cannot do. Okay. But I can tell you right now, as a candidate for office in our town, Facebook platforms are being used to spread absolute lies with no justification. And when my team goes and responds to it, they block the post. So you have thousands of people in a community that are just believing one side, and they're told, don't look at the other side. Now, I don't think that's the right use of the platform.
Okay, but I agree with you, Steve. But if I said, if I made an allegation, right, and I said, Steve Rao had an affair with Mother Teresa when Mother Teresa was alive. Okay, and I'm your political opponent, what would be your recourse? Now, if I rang people and told them that over the phone, your recourse wouldn't be to tell AT&T or Verizon that I should no longer be permitted to make phone calls. Your recourse would be to take legal action against me for defamation or other things that I've breached. What we are seeing now is tech taking it upon themselves to allow some speech and not to allow others. Now, we have free speech, but that free speech is abridged by you can't yell fire in a crowded theatre, and you can't say things that are completely untrue and unfounded and defamatory against people. And there's many other things that where you have your free abridged, your speech abridged. But why should the arbiter of that be a private corporation who is subjected to their employees' whims and fancies, or even the loudest yellers' whims and fancies or political ideals? This is what's going wrong, and what do you do about it? I think something's got to give. I think that something's going to break eventually, and it's a bad move for tech to do it, because eventually they're going to lose, because whenever big corporations, the big oil companies do the same thing. Whenever big corporations overstep the bounds, eventually there is the day of reckoning.
Yeah. Agreed.
Well,
I
I've
think
got.
very
We're
important.
going to talk about that on Friday. I
Hold on
got
a
to run,
second,
Sasha.
Anthony.
Didn't interrupt, but thank you so much. I'll be back tomorrow briefly, and then Friday for the full hour. Okay.
Wonderful.
For
Thank
the
you
for
so
the record, I'm not accusing Steve Ray of ever having an affair with Mother Teresa. I use that example because it's absurd. So for our audience and the YouTube censors, that was not a legitimate
I want to be.
allegation.
I want to be. I want to be facetious and crack a joke, but you know what? Give me that tape. Yes, because in this day and age, even an innocent little snide between old friends, can you know what you know where I'm going? I've got something I want to say that's a little bit funny, but you know what? I'm going to say it to myself.
Say it to yourself and maybe put it in the chat.
And it's nothing bad. It's just okay. You know,
at least face-to-face human contact, we can say what we like. But
face to face, that's right.
YouTube,
And that's a good point for those of you out there. Just a reminder: when you're on these platforms, be very careful about what you say because they can come back and use it against you, right? So, I mean, look, we have to ask ourselves, any kind of foul language, bad language, kind of jokes that could be misinterpreted, statements like that. These are really, really things.
Well, only if you're moderate or only if you're centre left and to the right of centre left. If you're hard left, you can say whatever you like. There is no restrictions. Steve, I'm going to leave you with this note because I'm going to get the last jab in because you have to go. So I take it then that you finally agree that Donald Trump should not have been barred from all of these social media platforms, that was wrong. And that Democrats should have stood up for him for the same reason as what we all said. Everybody who was in the center said, eventually the tide will turn and it will turn on us. So do you agree now that it all starts with one thing and it's a slippery slope? Donald Trump should never have been censored.
I think everybody should be held to the same standard. And so I don't know. I can't remember what he was tweeting about or what he was saying, but if he wasn't tweeting lies and just tweeting his opinions, then
who's the arbiter of what's a lie and what's not? You're a lawyer. You should know what the beginning of the First Amendment was. The Supreme Court cases, I can't think of the top of my head, that actually set out that you can lie about government affairs with impunity because if you're not allowed to do that, then that would be an abridgment of freedom of the press.
No, listen, there is not a big deal. All what he said, and actually he said it live, and he also put it in a tweet, that we will fight like a hell. Only strong people can retake the country, and let's go to Capitol and let's do the fight. There's nothing big about this. So he said that, well, he has freedom of speech, does he? So he used his freedom of speech. So he, while doing that, he excited the people. So actually today, if I'm not mistaken, is exactly 9 months since the resurrection of January 6th. And one of the reasons why Democrats will lose next year is that they are unable to prosecute Donald Trump. They just unable. They're like impotents. They see a wonderful girl and they want to make love to her, but they're impotents. They cannot do that. They can only think about it. That's exactly what's happened with Democrats.
Where is Nick? We need Nick to come on here so we can talk about, because I'm sure that he thinks it's wonderful. We need Nick on here so we can discuss First Amendment issues.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I don't know where Nick's at today and everything, but you're right. We need to bring him on, and hopefully he'll be on tomorrow and everything. Actually, y'all know that I've become a fan, even though sometimes I become too much of a fan because I stay up too late with it sometimes, even though I did not last night. Clubhouse and the Clubhouse app and everything. But definitely they have got some new things going on in that some people are concerned about for exactly that reason, the freedom of speech, because they've added a clip app or a clip feature, so you can clip part of what has been said and add to the Instagram or whatever other posts you may be making and everything. And you can also, apparently very soon, they're going to add a replay, because right now everything that goes on in Clubhouse is happening at that time and there is no record of it. But if they have replay, then that may stop the trolls, but it also may be concerned for those that are making all kinds of statements and things of that nature, because then you can literally go back like you can in this platform and replay what was said. But that's not the case right now in Clubhouse. Whatever you say is gone off into the netherland, but they are adding that feature. And I do know that there are some people that are concerned about that because they are feeling that that could limit their freedom of speech, because right now they feel free to say whatever they want to because they know that there is no permanent record of it afterwards. So like I said, maybe people are taking notes among each other, but there's no real permanent record unless it is recorded. And they do have the recording feature, but usually there's a little red button telling you that it's being recorded at that time, but usually it's not. So that is going to be interesting to see if they add the replay feature, because that's going to maybe cause some people a little bit of hesitation in going in that direction. But getting off of that topic and coming back to something else, what do you think about the Supreme Court apparently getting ready to take on the case of what many people is saying is the CIA's worst kept secret, which is the fact that definitely the U.S. and America has, when we're in the middle of a war, we have definitely tortured people that are involved in the other side. So that is what the case is about. It is the United States versus Zubaydah, and I may probably mispronounce the name, but that is a Supreme Court case that is going on today. It's a hearing on Wednesday, and it's a case about a man who was tortured by the CIA over an intelligence.
Allegedly.
It's also a case about one of the U.S. intelligence community's worst kept secrets. And I do agree that, a lot of people know that if you're in the middle of a war, a lot of these things will take place and things along those lines. So what is your thoughts about this case? And are we surprised? And a lot of the media on both the right and the left are saying, are we surprised that this has been going on? It's not anything new, and they're trying to figure out even why this is on the Supreme Court's docket. But I was just wondering y'all's thoughts about this, as this apparently is a major case, and it's going to expose what is a state secret, and maybe also the impact of state secrets to the American public.
I'll defer to you, Sasha.
Do you remember the movie about capturing Osama bin Laden? It took the prize, Oscars, and so on. And half of the movie is torture of operative of Al Qaeda, and finally, what they got out of them led to destruction of Osama bin Laden. So now, I think this tortured people, they should have been killed subsequently, so there would be no case that you have to justify why you torture or so on. How could they torture somebody who was dead? I didn't torture a dead person. Okay, so that would close the issue once and for all. And I think the torture is, for the last few thousand years, it was a legitimate instrument of getting information from people who are not easily agree to provide that information. However, there are ways of doing that, and even church did it in medieval times, and Soviet Union still continue to do that, and probably Chinese and so on. So I don't see a big deal, really, that some people need to be tortured in order to provide the information.
Well, just to give in, and I'd love to hear Shaquille's thoughts on this as well, just to get into the nuance of the story. It says that although the Supreme Court has long held that the federal government may prevent private parties from obtaining information that in the interest of national security should not be divulged, the appeals court reasoned that the government cannot hide information that is already public. In order to be a state secret, a fact must first be a secret. So Judge Richard Payas wrote in a fairly nuanced opinion laying out the process a trial court should use in determining what information about Zubaydah's detention and torture may be disclosed by his lawyers and ultimately to the investigators from Poland.
Well, look, these things are complicated. Sasha may well be correct that in the event that, somebody has the codes to a nuclear bomb. What's that movie with, I think Nicole Kidman's in it, and George Clooney's in it. In the event where there's a nuclear bomb in a city, it's in New York City, and somebody has the code to disarm the bomb, is it ethically, we forget about the law, is it ethically reasonable to use torture as a technique to prevent that? Well, is it ethical then to kill, a car with 10 children in it? What about 100 children? I mean, how do you value life? The issue, I think, is a legal one, not a moral one here, which is, can the United States engage in that sort of conduct? As I understand it, this happened in Guantanamo Bay, and I haven't read very much up on the case, to be honest. But this happened in Guantanamo Bay and in Poland, I think.
Yes.
Now, I just Googled a little bit off it because I thought that these weren't CIA operatives, and that was what I was just Googling then. These were CIA contractors. So, if there is even a crime being committed, who bears the responsibility of that? The contractors or the CIA who allowed it? Who's responsible for it? And whilst it is clearly, in my opinion, most likely a breach of the Declaration of Human Rights, the Human Rights Commission has no sort of powers over countries, especially over a Security Council nation, which the United States is. So, I think it's really a question of what are we prepared to accept and what are we not in the West, to secure our freedoms. And the question, it really isn't about, to me, the deeper question isn't about whether he did it or not, because it appears that he was completely innocent of the allegations. But that's not really the question. The question is, are these techniques reasonable and acceptable? Because if they are reasonable and acceptable, then you must be prepared to use them at the risk of actually using them against somebody who is innocent in order to secure your freedoms. I tend not to like that. I tend to think that we should abhor that. But how the military and how security services or spies, or whatever you want to call them, how they secure our freedoms is probably going to be brutal in ways that we hopefully will never really know. And so, how much do we question what they feel they have to do? I don't know. I think the ethical questions here are very complicated. The Supreme Court can really only address this as far as the law is concerned, but the ethical considerations are much deeper. And it's worth noting that when they had the Nuremberg trials, one of the things that came out before they prosecuted Nazis was, wait, did we do it? Right. And literally the law was, if we did it, as in Allied forces, if we did it, it wasn't a crime. So the only things that they were prosecuted for were things that they did that we didn't do, right? The only things and all the other things that they did, which seem very, very egregious, they weren't prosecuted for if we had at any time conducted similar types of activities. So the distinction between law and ethics is one that I think is very important for us to acknowledge.
And speaking of the distinction between ethics and law, there's another
and
very
morality.
big. I said, speaking of law and ethics
and morality, yeah.
Excuse me?
I said law, ethics, and morality.
Yeah, the difference. And speaking of law, ethics, and morality, and everything, another issue that is before the Supreme Court that a lot of people, and particularly women of all ages, are concerned about is the whole concept, and I think that that's going to come up as well, of abortion and when is a fetus actually viable or not viable, because that could impact Roe versus Wade, and we could see that eventually get overturned. And some people might be ecstatic about that. Other people may be concerned. I've noted there have been several protests around the country.
Why are you saying that women of all ages are concerned about it? Men aren't concerned about this?
No, men as well, but I just heard most of the people that I've been seeing in the protests, and I've been watching a few of the news stories, have been women's organizations and women groups. But yes, men are concerned, myself included. So that was probably not a good statement on my part, but I will make that correction. Men and women are concerned about it. But what is y'all's thoughts about the Supreme Court possibly changing the point based on what is going on in Texas, and I think there's one other state as well, as to when things are viable. And should Roe versus Wade be overturned? And should we be looking at this? And do you think that there should be there's that whole battle between the right to choose and those that might be pro-abortion or anti-abortion? And I'm sure that people on both sides are looking very closely at these cases and which way the courts will go. But that is also one that might be seen as more of an ethical question than a legal question. And
I think, Mark, that's a legal question, right? Again, people might ethically and morally come up with different ideas, but ultimately it's a legal question as to whether or not we agree that something should be legal or shouldn't be. But other than that, I'm not really sure how I or even Sasha can respond to what you've asked, because you're asking us, how do we feel about a hypothetical situation, like a hypothetical decision the Supreme Court's going to render? Well, I don't know, because we don't know what the Supreme Court's going to say.
That's very true.
I think there are two issues. So one is legal, indeed, and it's a Supreme Court. And another one is real life. In real life, 1 out of 4 American women had abortion sometimes in her life. 1 out of 4. So only 3 women out of 4.
That sounds like a very high statistic.
It's a high statistic, yes, and it's available, and it's 1 out of 4. Now, so if those women, we're talking about millions of women, in fact, if they are deprived of legal abortions, they will do illegal abortions. Because if you have a decision that you don't want that pregnancy for various reasons, including health, but it could be just anything. Maybe your financial situation. Maybe you feel that you are not strong financially and the father is not going to support the kid or so on, and how I'm going to survive. So these people decide to do abortions. And I'm not saying whether it's the right decision or not, but that's their decision. And for them, it's the right decision, whatever they decided to do. So they will travel outside of the states where they will do illegal abortions. They will fly outside of country if needed. If that's their mindset and they decided upon it, nothing ever will stop her from doing abortion. Nor Supreme Court, nor the judges, no prosecutors, no one in this world. If women made her mind to do abortion, will stop her. She will do it. So now you can go from there.
Well, Sasha, let me just say a couple of things, and I'm not going to say publicly where I stand on this issue. I'm just going to address a couple of things that you've said. It is true that when abortion has been illegal, women have sought illegal abortions, and oftentimes they have, they've been badly injured because of it. We've heard, and not just in the United States, but around the world, coat hangers
sometimes too.
Coat hangers being used, and all sorts of various techniques. 25% of American women. That seems like a very, very high number. You'll have to fill me in on where you got that statistic from. That doesn't sound right to me, but I'm not saying it's not correct. It just sounds extremely.
I'll find it and I'll provide for sure.
And I just looked it up.
However, just to address the core part of that, should abortion be legal? Because if it's not, women are going to do it anyway. Well, on that argument, drugs should be legal. Somebody who wants to do cocaine is going to do cocaine regardless. People who are not interested in doing cocaine are not going to all of a sudden do cocaine or meth.
Shakir, this is not a very good example, because the use of drugs, the problem is that not that injuries that you will suffer as a result of the drugs that you're taking. It's trafficking of drugs. It's affecting other people. With abortions, you don't affect anybody except yourself.
And arguably the unborn child.
No, unborn child, until it's born, it's nothing but a biomass of.
Okay, yes, Sasha, hang on, wait. That's your opinion. But
yes.
The opposition to that argument will say that life is life. Now, of course, the big question that was really resolved by Roe versus Wade was, well, at what point after conception is the child actually alive, or is the unborn fetus actually alive? And, some people will say, well, it's alive at conception. Other people will say, well, it's alive at 9 months, just before it's born. Everybody has a different opinion on where that lies. Roe versus Wade essentially set out that decision should be left to the mother in consultation with her family and her medical team. So this is a very complicated issue if we're going to talk about ethics. What happens if you're pregnant with a child who 50 years ago would not have survived, and today will survive because they're going to have their throat cut, a breathing tube put down their throat, and be force fed through nasal feeding, but the child is brain dead, can't read, can't write, can't see, can't hear, but it is human life. Is that child better off being aborted? What about in the cases of a young child, 12, 13-year-old, a girl who's been raped? But then on the flip side of it, what happens to a couple? They've been together for a long time, they have an argument, they break up, and the father really wants to have the child and is prepared to support the child. The mother says, my body, my choice. The ethical constraints here, I don't think they're black and white. And I think that both sides, both the pro-life and the pro-choice side, have valid points. And I don't think it's appropriate to dismiss one side or the other, because they both have appropriate points. And I think that we should recognize that today we have advancements in medical technology that allow us to keep children alive that otherwise may not be viable at a much earlier age if they're born prematurely. And oftentimes it's legal to abort them at the same age that we could keep them alive. The other ethical consideration is what you just said. What happens to those families that can't afford it? And, the hard right Republicans who say that abortion should be illegal under all circumstances are the same hard right Republicans that do not want to fund social services. And, you see, I've looked on some of the adoption sites in the past just to see, what's going on. And America tends to actually publish the ages and the photographs of these kids. And I actually had to ring one group because I couldn't understand what was going on. And the child was 17 and a half or something. They were about to turn 18, like in a few weeks. And I said, why do you even have this child up for adoption? And they said, because this child has no family. They've been in the program since they were 9. They just didn't, for whatever reason, there wasn't a family prepared to take them because it's much harder to place older children, especially teenagers. And what ends up happening is they age out of the system and they're left to fend for themselves. Now, hard right Republicans generally are not prepared to provide any kind of social support and funding for these kids as they grow, because they want low tax rates and all that sort of stuff. Okay, and it's all up to personal responsibility, something that I often say. But the flip side is that hard left Democrats just say, well, who cares? Abortion should be used as a contraception, which I think most people don't have that view. Most people are kind of in the center and would have the view that Hillary Clinton used to have, which is we don't like it. It should be legal but rare. That's generally been the sort of center position for Republicans and Democrats on this issue. So when we start debating this topic, as I said, I'm not going to say publicly where I stand on it, but when we debate this topic, both sides are very impassioned about what they believe. And I think that it's important to consider things from both sides. I don't think there's a black and white straight answer, ethically, morally, or even legally. But legally, unfortunately, they have to put it black and white. This is where we're drawing the line. And I think that's a tough job.
We actually did a whole program on Roe versus Wade because it's coming up before the Supreme Court on Lawyers' Dead. And so I was forced to do research, which I hate to do, especially when it's not paid for by a third party. Okay, and the thing is, here's what I came out with.
Wait, sorry, I have to interrupt you. You, the Democrat?
Yeah, I know.
You hate to do work that's not paid for.
Look, I'm a Democrat. I just want to get paid by the
hang on. But you hate to do
I want to
work.
get paid by a corporation. Same thing.
Yeah,
Get paid.
you hate to do work that's not paid for.
That
That would be the equivalent of somebody working and having 70% of their work taken off them, right? Through the tax rate that you want.
That's absolutely correct.
Right.
But let me tell you what this research showed. 81% of our population believe that biologists are the best people to actually determine when life begins. Only 2% said the Supreme Court should be making that decision. Of the biologists, an overwhelming 95% believed that life began at conception, And even the people that were pro-choice, 60% of them, and I can show you the studies, it's unnecessary, believed that life began at conception, and the pro-lifers were 90%. So the vast majority of biologists said, look, when conception takes place, human life begins, period, the end. If you look at the Roe versus Wade, and you can look at the site, it's 450 U.S. Supreme Court 113. It's a 1973 U.S. Supreme Court decision. Now go fact check me on the site. Okay, you'll see what happened. The Supreme Court, Harry Blackmun, who wrote the majority opinion for the court, said, well, we're not going to take that. We're going to look at the AMA, the American Medical Association, when life begins. And they said when it's viable outside the womb. And that's been our law since, well, 1973. The pro-life people actually have a very good argument that life did begin at conception. But here's how it's being countered, which is quite interesting. At Northeastern University, where I teach, I watched the law put an amicus brief, and I could do that too. I'm licensed before the Supreme Court, and I've done amicus briefs before. But the thing is, their argument was, well, let's go look and see what the vast majority of other countries do. Notice, and I'm going to tell you about lawyers, they didn't look at biology, they didn't look at hard science, and they do this all the time because they didn't do well in math, they didn't do well in science. That's the reason they went to law. I mean, I'm serious. Hey, Shaquille, if they were good in math, good at science, they'd be medical doctors. But they weren't. So they went to law. And the thing is, when they have to go to things like biology, virology, do studies or actual stuff, they just lose it. So what happens instead, they go to arguments. And their argument was, well, other well-developed countries have this type of law. Let's go follow them, rather than look at the hardcore science. If you look at the hardcore science, it begins at conception, at least the vast majority. Now the question is
let's just go back slightly.
Why none of them recommend hysterectomies and vasectomies? You never hear that. Now, unfortunately, my mom was actually a chief nurse at Tampa General Hospital, so I got bombarded when I was a kid with all this medical stuff and doctors and nurses. Bleh. Okay, and vasectomies and hysterectomies were quite common. But see, this would create a burden on the person. They'd actually have to do something, God forbid, to stop. They don't want kids anyway, otherwise they won't have abortion, to stop having a kid. And for some
hang on, sorry. Let me just scratch you there.
Abortion issue gone.
Let me just scratch you there. We don't know the reason for people not wanting to carry the child to term. It could be that the girl is 12 or 13 years old or something like that, has been raped, and she doesn't want to carry it to term.
I mean,
but she may well want to have children. It may also be something that everybody has to tiptoe around. It may also be
why are we tiptoeing around vasectomies and hysterectomies?
That may also be that the mother realizes that the child has some sort of deformity or some sort of disability, which it opens up another ethical question. What is it okay?
Yeah, there's a lot of old people. They should be exterminated also. Look at COVID-19.
It also opens up another ethical question: is it okay to abort a child because they have a disability,
Sure.
right? And the thing is that if you believe that abortion's a choice, then your reason for having the abortion shouldn't matter. Other people say no, that should matter. But I just want to go back to something that you said. When the Supreme Court made the ruling about the viability of the fetus outside of the womb,
that was the decision.
It's been 50 years since then. So medical technology has improved since then. So if we're able to have that fetus survive outside the womb now, should the law be revisited?
Yeah,
this is going to cause that issue because it's gone to the extremes of right to life, all life is sacred, versus absolutely abortion should just be a healthcare decision and there's no consideration for the fetus. And there isn't a middle ground there.
Look, I understand it, but you know what's happening though out there because of the low information, low IQ people out there, which we had a big debate on this on Lawyer's Den too. And I explained to Sasha, I don't listen to 900 players. I'm sorry, I listen to grandmasters. Okay.
See, I'm a 1700 player.
Well, I may listen to you every now and then, but maybe not. Okay, but the thing is, what they do is they go to slogans like pro-life, pro-choice. They never address what we're addressing, the hardcore issues, because the thing is they would have to put their mental caps on and get their IQ over 100 to do that, and they can't.
This is my complaint about your side of politics. Everyone wants to go on about climate change. Let's build in America. Let's spend $1 trillion, this, that, and the other, and let's address climate change by building electric charging stations for motor vehicles. But as soon as somebody like me says, well, hang on a second. How are you going to generate the energy? How are you going to generate the electricity to charge the cars? And what's the environmental cost of the lithium batteries that you're putting in these cars? All of a sudden, people will say, well, the climate change. If you're against this, what about all the black people that are being, disproportionately affected? I'm like, no. Hang on a second. Forget about the color of people's skin. The question is the solution that you're offering actually going to solve the problem? And people look at me, and I'm the president of the Green Alliance, the International Green Alliance, and people look at me like I'm some sort of nefarious, planet-hating person.
Oh, that's good. It's a good valid point. I have coal energy.
What they do is they go back to slogans.
It develops the electricity, and so I'm producing all this coal to generate the electricity that you're running your stupid Tesla.
Nick, you raised an interesting point. I have to ask you something really quickly. Just ask you something really quick, Nick, because you raised an interesting point. And you talked about, let's push for, and I'm not saying that you're saying this totally, but you mentioned vasectomies and hysterectomies.
Sure.
You do realize that at least one of those, and this comes down where a lot of the women are concerned and everything, is reversible. The other one, once it happens, it is not reversible.
Right.
And that's also an issue as well.
What's not reversible?
My mom
you
used
can
to do
reverse a
those all the time.
vasectomy. You cannot reverse the hysterectomy.
5
Yes,
kids.
you can, Mark.
I mean, the
Yes,
thing is,
you can reverse a vasectomy.
some
you can
are
reverse
reversing
and hysterectomy, depending on what's actually been done. So I don't think Nick actually means hysterectomy. What I think he means is having their tubes tied.
Right.
That's also reversible.
Well, tube tying,
And the thing is, so the real problem is this. Now the burden is placed on the person who's complaining, and they don't want that. They'd rather just complain rather than look for solutions. And this happens all the time.
Yeah,
with humans.
It sounds a bit like federal Democrats, doesn't it?
Yeah, probably you can read politics. But speaking of politics, you brought up a very good point yesterday, Shaquille. I don't know if it was you or somebody who were in the panel, and we're going to discuss it on Media Monday.
I'm disappointed you didn't see my earlier points with my thing about how tech has silenced us.
Oh, well, we're going to discuss on Media Monday. It's called Defending Facebook, okay? I'm really intrigued, okay, that Facebook got attacked by major media. And if you look at the studies that are out there, major media is being overtaken by social media. I mean, it's like a growing cancer they can't stop. So what would be a great way for major media to destroy social media is to go after them whenever they find a weak point. It's like a chess game. Sasha, you go weak point, gram, like that. I can tell you 60 Minutes because I watched all that.
I won't tell you who actually told you that.
Yeah. Somebody on my panel told me.
We'll just keep that between us.
60 Minutes, they engineered that whole thing. In other words, and they do that all the time. I actually was on 60 Minutes for like 2 seconds. It's just a cameo one time. But what they did is, and David K. Johnson was on a lot, so was David Walker, who were on our shows. Yeah. Okay, but 60 Minutes, what happens. They discuss this in their board and say, hey, this is great. This is a way we could take down Facebook. We got some purported whistleblower out there who's going to say how bad they are because of all the stuff, because kids watch Instagram, which they could easily not watch. Notice there's no opposing side. Facebook is sitting there shocked, so they don't know how to respond. And look, if you don't like it, just turn it off. Oh, but their bodies are different. Now, wait a minute. This is traditional media. This is the media that every night you can see like 1,000 murders, okay? And they're saying that Facebook is badly influencing people. I just can't believe that they're actually doing it. So we're going to defend Facebook on Media Monday.
I don't know who you say. I don't know quite.
We distribute a lot on Facebook.
When you say we, I don't know who we is, but I'm not going to defend.
First, we'll have opposing opinions.
I'm not going to defend anybody. I don't have anything against Facebook, but I'm not going to defend anybody at all. What I'll defend is the Declaration of Human Rights, freedom, the ability for all sides to express their opinions unabridged by the whims and fancies of anybody else. That's what I'll defend.
Well, I know that. See, on ours, we'll throw both sides. But the thing is, if you look at what's happening with major media, you're not getting both sides of the story. You're getting one side of the story from CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System, who engineered this thing on 60 Minutes, who re-engineer it every day. And then if you look at it from an executive standpoint, what a great way to stop the moving train of social media. Just hit them right in the gut, baby. And that's really what's going on. But no one mentions that.
Well, that's because there are two monopolies that are existing, and let's be very honest. The traditional media is basically a monopoly. There's basically 3 or 4 principal entities that exist in that and everything, and they pretty much do everything in conjunction in a lot of ways and everything. And even in the social media, there are pretty much 3 or 4 major players as well, whether we're talking Google, Facebook, or the rest of those people that some of our folks on shows here, like Private, I believe it's called, have talked about and everything. So that the eventual solution, and I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to have to be like some of those other industries. They're going to have to bust up these monopolies in order for there to actually be the true freedom that needs to exist. But when that's going to happen, or if it's going to happen,
as Rex Lee and as Jay often say, it might help if the government actually started enforcing the laws that they have on the books.
Exactly. Right. I agree with that.
Yeah. Well, the antitrust is on the books, but you need.
Yeah, but there are other laws as well about curtailing freedom.
Yeah, but you got to have somebody interested in picking up the file. Okay, and so the thing is, when you see this stuff on 60 Minutes, I'm going, they're just generating a hit on social media.
But an overzealous prosecutor that wants to go after, I've brought this up on the show before, go after some guy because he's been importing fish for 20 years. And he may, if you twist the laws and regulations, you may be able to make a case against him. Oh, well, let's prosecute this guy, put him in jail for 8 years. Right? And then it wasn't very clear whether he'd even broken a law. Oh, yeah, we'll prosecute that. But, dealing with a big company which might be infringing on the rights of something, not just of people in general, but the sitting president of the United States of America, really? It might have been his final days, but really? In any case, we are past the hour. Back to you, Mark.
We're past the hour, and I know we're going to wrap up. There's a couple of issues that I hope that you'll be back on again tomorrow, Nick, that I was getting ready to bring up, and one of them was going to be actually a conversation with Shaquille as well, and I'll bring them up right now, but we can talk about them tomorrow and everything. But one of them was there is a new push, and there are more and more school resource officers that are police officers, and there is a whole conversation about whether this is a good thing or a bad thing because of the fact that there are, in 1975, only 1% of schools reported having officers on site, but because of those mass shootings and various other things, there has now been as many as 72% in our various high schools around the country, and there might even be more because that statistic was from 2018. So that was one issue that I'm hoping we'll get to on tomorrow. Another was the oil spill that is taking place in California, and there is some conversation about the infrastructure part of that because they're saying that some of those things that are existing there were outdated and were already starting to weather, which means that we could have more.
Can I just ask a question to clarify? So the evil Republicans under Donald Trump didn't fund infrastructure, so therefore an oil spill in California is Trump's fault. Is that how that's going to be spun?
No, that's not going to be.
I know you didn't say it. Give it time. Give it time. It's coming.
That actually it was done under various administrations when those oil things were built out there, and Trump had nothing to do with it. We're talking about several decades ago, and under both Democratic and Republican.
It's to get $3.5 trillion spent.
Yeah,
that's the whole spend.
The evil Republicans are so opposed to it, and by them being opposed to the $3.5 trillion, of which none goes into hard infrastructure to fix oil, but we just ignore that. The evil Republicans, they're not wanting to fund childcare. They're not wanting to fund, broadband only for black people and not for white people. And so therefore they hate the climate. And because they hate the climate, they actually support the idea of oil spills. I can see it already. That's going to be the front page of New York Times next week. I guarantee
I'll send you a book on American politics.
Yeah. I've got one. And the last thing that I'm hoping to get, and this is what actually I was going to ask Shaquille. So he actually has a whole day to come up with this answer now because I was going to get to it today and everything, but we never got to it. Is the median white family net worth is $171,000. The median black family is $17,000. So I was going to ask Shaquille if he had any solutions to that and everything. So think about that, Shaquille. And if you got any answers for me tomorrow,
I've got lots of answers. But what I can tell you, the solution isn't to take the richest, highest level of middle class black people and put them into corporate executive jobs and ignore the black people who are already poor. That's not the solution.
I agree with that.
Helping the already successful black families continue to be successful whilst ignoring the poverty of black people, that doesn't make sense to me.
No, and I agree with you on that, and I think most people would agree with that as well.
Well,
Part of
we
the
can talk
article that I
about
would bring up
solutions.
will also have to do with the
I have
support
some
that
ideas.
banks get as well, but we can get to that tomorrow.
The what? The support the banks get.
The support that minority banks get versus non-minority banks in the minority communities, but that's a whole other conversation we can talk about tomorrow. But my
Yeah,
bigger question,
I won't have time. I won't have time to come up with a response to that, so I'll have to do it on the fly as I usually do. But I do look forward to hearing how you're going to twist this into a racial issue. I'm looking forward to it.
We'll send you the research material tonight, Shaquille.
Oh yeah, I bet you guys will.
Yeah.
it
We got a lot of research material.
sounds like some of those Democratic bills that they asked to be voted on. Vote for it. We haven't written it yet. Here are some blank pieces of paper. But if you could just vote for it, and after it passes, we'll tell you what's in it. Yeah, I bet.
Sounds
well, I'm
good.
gonna have an interesting case study for you, but I'll bring that up, and I will send you that information.
Okay. Are we going to say goodbye to everybody?
Yeah, it was time to say goodbye to everybody. By the way, y'all get to have some real fun, Nick, because I get to play a cartoon character in about an hour and a half. So if anybody wants to go to Clubhouse, I will be actually playing the role of Echo. So I've only got like literally 2 sentences or 2 lines, and it's at the end of the production, but it's from 1 to 2 o'clock. So I've got to sit there and wait for everybody else to get to my line, but I will have 2 lines at the end of it.
Sweet. Okay. All right. I guess we'll see everybody tomorrow, and Steve will be beaming in from PBS.
No, that's going to actually be Friday. He said he's beaming from his house
Oh, Friday.
tomorrow.
Okay, right. Yeah, I'll be beaming in.
Mark, if you get these 2 lines right, acting as a cartoon character, may I suggest a future in politics? Because I think that's what they do in Washington, D.C. They act like cartoon characters.
Hey, that sounds like it could be a plan. That could be a whole new career and everything. So we'll see how it plays out.